Solidarity and shalom. Hello to those who are watching later. We are doing an open discussion stream. This is just kind of random. Um, there's some stuff I wanted to talk about. Specifically, I wanted to talk about what's going on in Swaziland right now, also known as Eswatini, by the absolute monarchy that rules Swaziland, but the pro-democracy forces call it Swaziland still. So some background, Swaziland, now known as Eswatini as of like 2019, is the only absolute monarchy left in Europe or left in Africa. There are a few constitutional monarchies like Morocco and like the Kingdom of Lesotho and stuff like that. But for the most part, Africa is the home of republics, due largely, in fact, to the reason that national democratic movements were used to liberate most of Africa from their colonial masters. But so what's going on, and this has been going on since like the heavy protests in Swaziland have been going on since like June, but protests against the absolute monarchy have been going on for decades. Since the anti-colonial sentiments started to arise in Africa. But Swaziland is the only absolute monarchy left in Africa. And what exacerbated it was, all the regular things, what an absolute monarchy like that does on a society that's striving for democracy. But just open misuse of funds during this COVID pandemic really just kicked it up to 100. And one of the leading figures in this pro-democracy uprising that is sweeping the nation is the Communist Party of Swaziland. And the Communist Party of Swaziland is all over social media, despite the government trying to shut down all internet, let alone social media. They're still they're a clandestine organization, and they're based out of South Africa, but they have a lot of activists on the ground right now because the country's in an upheaval, and any day now something big could happen. And that's sort of what's going on in Swaziland, aka Eswatini, as the absolute monarchy likes to call it. The Communist Party of Swaziland literally is called for everyone to rise up and overthrow the regime. It's happening now, and we're not hearing too much about it here in the West. And Swaziland is a significant country. It's a very big country relative to a lot of other countries, not really to the United States or anything, but it's a large African country. And it's never mind, I lied to you. It's not large, and I'm a geography major. It's actually a very small African country, but it's one of these holdouts from the age of colonialism. The reason it was able to gain its independence in that fashion was because it was one of those small little kingdoms like Lesotho as well in southern Africa that made a deal with the colonial masters, the British, to say, we will be your protectorate if you give us a level of autonomy under our king system, usually based around tribes. But yeah, it's a tiny country in southern Africa. Um, I think it's completely, yeah, it's completely landlocked within South Africa, but it's near the border of Mozambique, and it's a mostly it's a mostly Swazi country, hence the name Swaziland. And right, and it's been an absolute monarchy ever since its independence uh, from colonial rule. And right now, the entire country is on fire. It's popping off. It's hello, welcome. They're calling for democracy, and we have to understand, like, oh, we might want the Communist Party of Swaziland, who's leading this right now, to say, oh, why not call for socialism right away? This is a country that's lived under an absolute monarchy for its entire existence, and now the Communist Party of Swaziland and other democratic forces have united in fighting against um, this absolutist monarchy that has absolutely destroyed. Um, their main religion is Christianity. It looks like. Because I actually do have the demographics here in front of me right now. And hey, Dust, good to see you. We're just having an open stream right now, and I wanted to talk about some things going on in the news, and the biggest thing, in my opinion, on the global scale is what's happening in Swaziland, aka Eswatini. Eswatini. I've been saying that wrong the whole time. Eswatini. It's the absolute monarchy regime's name for Swaziland that they implemented in 2018. The pro-democratic forces like the Communist Party and everything are still call it Swaziland. So that's what I'm going to do. Usually when it comes to foreign countries, I look for the Communist Party's opinion on things, unless they're absolutely, like, not dogmatically, but unless they're absolutely, some sort of mess up of a group, which happens sometimes. But it seems all of society outside of the ruling class in Swaziland has risen up. And the sad thing is that there have been, like, even the government has claimed that they killed 27 people. I'm looking at here on and according to Bloomberg, I am on Wikipedia, by the way, and according to Bloomberg, for it's been over 24, and according to Pudemo, I don't know what that is, 50 plus, and there's been a lot of injuries. And yeah, it just seems that Swaziland is ready for democracy. It's long overdue. If you go and look on social media, on Facebook and other places, you can find the Communist Party of Swaziland, which is why I even know that this is going on, because I didn't hear this from any news sources. I think Telesur and Press TV and RT are some of the places that might have mentioned it, right? Than these non-Western sources. But the place that I've been hearing this, these pro-democratic uprisings from, is from the Facebook account of the Communist Party of Swaziland, and they are really, really, really going off right now. And the Communist Party of Swaziland has a lot of good stuff to say right now. They are rallying the people, and they've called for a mass uprising. And Morningstar has an article, Morningstar from Britain, that's sort of left-leaning newspaper in Britain. The Communist Party of Swaziland causing for a nationwide mass uprising against the regime. So what's happening? Yeah, exactly. We would have never heard about it, but this is the last absolute monarchy in Africa that seems to be on its last leg. And even, the United Nations is like, hey, maybe you guys should listen to the pro-democracy people. When the UN steps in and is like, okay, y'all, maybe you're doing a bad thing. It takes a lot for the UN to step into one of its friendly nations and tell them that they're doing wrong. One of the pro-imperialist nations. Oh, geez. So myself, I send my complete solidarity and prayers to the Communist Party of Swaziland and to the people of Swaziland and to everyone fighting for a better life and democracy. I really truly hope that they can achieve success in their struggle for democracy and freedom and liberation and sovereignty. I think one thing that people have stopped talking about because it's been out of the news for a while is the Tigray War. The war in the Tigray. Since it started, the central government has held an election in the midst of a war. That's not unheard of, but on account of the entire northern section of the country is uh, not even fit to go to the polls. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was the best time to hold an election. I can't speak for them, but right now in Tigray, what had happened is that Tigray has been making gains into the what region is it? The central region, the Amhara region. And they made some gains into the Afar region, but they backed off and they went for the Amhara region, which is the region that has essentially been, the center of power in Ethiopia before socialists took over, before the socialist Derg took over. Like, for example, the old Ethiopian empire, the culture and language and everything was really based off of the Amhara region, and the Tigray people came to prominence during the 90s whenever they overthrew the socialist Derg and they instituted this, revolutionary ethnic federalism. And Hidasi, there's a YouTube channel called Hidasi, HIDASE, Hidasi, an Ethiopian comrade who really goes over the origins of this conflict in the Tigray, this war in the Tigray region, and also makes great videos about, assimilation and also the history of socialism within Ethiopia. It's very cool. Definitely go check him out. But right now they had been making gains into the Amhara region, but the Ethiopian forces have started to push back. And just today or just either today or the day before, there was airstrikes from the Ethiopian Air Force into the city, and it's been of Mekele, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is the capital of the Tigray region, and it killed some civilians. And so that's really unfortunate. And there's been ethnic cleansing in the Tigray region, and from all reports, there's been ethnic cleansing of Tigray people, of all ethnic peoples in this conflict. And if you ask me, I think it comes down to the root of tearing down a united socialist Ethiopia and instituting a federal system based on ethnicity, based on ethnic federalism. And I think that was the beginning of the end for this Ethiopian state. And I think that, the current leader, I think his name is let me see what his name is. Ahmed, Abiy, I think that's it, Abiy Ahmed, but he's the current leader who united all these ethnic federal parties into a single, liberal, neoliberal party, and I think he sort of recognized that the ethnic federalism was going to eventually cause this division, and I think he tried to stop it, but in doing so, it, I think, exacerbated the tensions with the Tigray, the people from the Tigray region, because they originally were the sort of constructors of this ethnic federalism. Because before, Tigray people were second-class citizens, much like all the other ethnicities in Ethiopia, before socialism. And so I think there's this sentiment that maybe ethnic federalism could have been the solution, but it eventually failed. Aloha, Robert. How are you? Good to see you. Love that flag in your new avatar. Long live the DPRK. Down with imperialism. Right now, we've been talking about... at first, we were talking about the democracy movement in Swaziland that's been really kicking off. It's the last absolute monarchy in Africa, and the democracy forces have really decided to, led by the Communist Party of Swaziland, have really kicked up, and there's been extreme violence from the state against them, and hopefully, all solidarity and prayers to the democracy forces in Swaziland. And then we started talking about a little bit updated about what's happening in Ethiopia and the ethno-federalism and how that was, that was the cause of it in the first place. Ethno-federalism is the reason, I think, that Ethiopia is in the situation it is now. And before ethno-federalism, you had, socialist Ethiopia, which was initiated by the Derg, and I think there's a lot of misinformation about that. And that's why I recommended Hidasi in his video regarding socialist Ethiopia. And I think if you look, one of my first community posts, it's either like my first or second community post, is sharing a video from Hidasi about socialist Ethiopia. He's Ethiopian, and we don't really get a perspective like that here in the West. And I really enjoy his work. So I've been seeing some, well, the only yeah, that's a complicated, that's a little bit more complex, but yeah, I totally sympathize with that, because when sovereignty was taken from Hawaii, it was taken when they had a monarchy. So I personally say whatever the Hawaiians choose, that's their fate, right? And no doubt they deserve their national liberation, and they deserve their sovereignty, and sovereignty is freedom. A nation's ability to determine its own fate is freedom in and of itself. And that's why we should always support these national liberation struggles. And Hawaii is one of those places that, well, it was taken by gunboat diplomacy, and it's different than the rest of the United States. It's wholly unique in its conditions, and it's one of those countries that if they wanted to separate, I would totally support them. There's a few people. I'm not for the balkanization of the United States, not by any means. I'm someone who believes in the unity of our struggle. But there are some cases that when a nation that has finally taken back its sovereignty and its agency, that they do get to decide, and it is beyond our purview of wanting them to stay or not. And I think Hawaii may be one of those places. But again, I'm a white Jew. I don't have much say in this. All I know is that I can fight for my neighbor and my community, and I can uplift the people, and I can try to build a solidarity between us that transcends all nation, because the international ideal unites us. But at the same time, we should be proud of our nation. We should be patriots. We should, express it. To be a communist is to have such deep love for the people. You have to have love for the people to be a communist. And I yeah, I have no idea. It's very high though. I know there's a large strata of Hawaiians, and I don't think that, you know I really don't know what what their what the majority of Hawaiians want. I don't know. But I do know that, just like any oppressed nation, that Hawaiians deserve to have their sovereignty and freedom and to decide their own fate. And if they decide to choose their own fate by being a part of some new American socialist system, then that's great. If they decide to separate, then frankly, that also is their choice. Because if we know one thing about national liberation and sovereignty, is that, it's giving these people agency and freedom. Now, maybe they do want to separate, but does that mean we abandon them? Say a new Africa decides to separate from the United States. Do we just abandon them? The rest of America just abandons them because they decide to separate? Hell no. If anything, we should be happy that they've taken things into their own hand, and we should become closer and more united with them and uplift each other, because our ideals transcend nation. And that's why, as internationalists, nationalists, patriots, we need to take all of this into account. We really do. And we need to understand that united, the ruling class fears us. It cannot sleep. It has night terrors about us. All it does is think about ways of stopping us from taking what is rightfully ours. And we need to remember that. They're fucking terrified of us. And united, they're they're going to be even more scared. I'll tell you that. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't think of a more clear a clear form of imperialism than the gunboat diplomacy of an actually very wealthy Hawaiian sovereign nation. Modern, wealthy. It was one of these trade hubs in the Pacific at that time. And it was, super duper well traveled, of course, which is why the United States wanted it. It's a connector to that trade in the Pacific. And unfortunately, we see the detrimental things that happen, and now it's a capitalist tourist hellhole. Like, people are never going to stop visiting Hawaii. It's a beautiful place. But that industry needs to be in the hands of Hawaiians. You know what I mean? Because the people who aren't benefiting the least from the tourism and the beauty of Hawaii are Hawaiians. And that's not right. And it's the same you can say anywhere else in America. These beautiful tourism spots, or these beautiful places that have these nice things, the people who are not benefiting from them are the people who live there, who built it, who maintain it, who make up that community, who make that thing tick. These are the people who always get the shit into the stick, and these are the people we have to fight for. Yeah, exactly. Imperialists are scared of a tiny island 90 miles off the coast of the evil empire. An island so small stands defiantly in the face of imperialism and says, no, we will choose our own fate. You will not tell us what to do. This is the way it's going to be done. We don't care what you say. And that is beautiful. That is sovereignty. That is freedom. And that's what we have to, that's an example that we have to recognize. And I just, We're talking about rice farmers from Vietnam who took on an empire and won. We're talking about goat herders from Afghanistan who took on an empire and won. We're talking about some backwoods, backwater weirdos who took on empires. Actually, they weren't backwoods, backwater weirdos. I'm one of those people. I come from the rural place, from the middle of nowhere. What we learn about these people that are most rejected by society, the people from the countryside, the country bumpkins, the backwater weirdos, the ones that are the most spit upon by the city elites. They're the ones who've made revolution in history. It wasn't the students from the universities, though they helped. It wasn't the intellectuals or intelligentsia from the cities, though they helped. It was it's people like Midwestern Rust Belt workers. It's people like farm workers from the Great Plains and fruit farmers from the West Coast and the South and cattle herders from Texas. These are the types of people that do revolution. These are the types of people that make revolution, at least historically. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm biased because I'm one of those backwoods, backwater people, country bumpkins. Maybe that's the problem. What I know is that at the end of the day, well, at least I'm not the only one who thinks those. Thanks to the Pan American. I just truly believe that if we have people, right? We have people that are so close. They even call themselves communists a lot of the time, or socialist or whatever. And they're usually coastal people from a city. And they're so close. They're so close to being right there with someone like me, someone from a rural area. Or, they're so close to being on that same level. But then they start speaking about certain things, certain topics, and it sort of just turns you off. It makes you feel like, oh, do you think you're better than me? Because right now you're speaking about the way that they speak about the working class of rural areas is with a disdain and a hate that I just don't get. There's this level of disdain for the working class that comes from a large section of the American left. And I feel like a lot of that disdain comes from people who have never lived amongst, a rural community before. I'm an LGBT person, right? And I'm a Jew. And I live in the middle of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant conservative rural Texas. But I feel more connection to these working class people here than I ever had to any of these leftoids or leftists from the cities. I know if my car breaks down on the side of the road, no matter what I look like or whatever, that a working class person in rural Texas will stop and help me get my shit together, regardless of who I am or what I look like. Yes, we have hate. We have bigotry. But this isn't, the root of that isn't, rural gays unite. And there's hate. and we feel it. We do, and we feel the alienation in our rural society as well for being, you know, an odd person out. But I don't see their hate as anything rational or as anything that is based out of it's the cultural hegemony of the ruling class of the region. Like, it's not their fault that they think that they're like that. If anything, under that hate, I see potential. I see great, great, great potential. Rural pansexual. There you go. And you know, I'm trans, and I guess you could call me pansexual. I'm some sort of sexual. I like consenting adults. That's basically my sexuality. But I think that what's most important is that we recognize that the root of what's happening in these places, like for example, homophobia or any other reactionary belief or laws that are instilled in a place, it's rooted in class. And how is it rooted in class? You know, we hear that all the time, but how is the superstructure of homophobia and racism, for example, how is that superstructure related to class? Well, I mean, first of all, the superstructure can't exist without the base, and the base can't exist without the superstructure. They define each other. So they're interconnected. But the base is always the root of the issue, and the base is the economy, the base economy, that being capitalism, and its appendages that grow out in the superstructure, like homophobia, bigotry. That cannot be targeted by just cutting off, you know, the appendages, because it'll just grow back like a hydra. It'll probably grow back angry, you know, like you cut off one head, it'll probably grow back two nastier heads. But if you aim at the core of the issue, which is the class struggle, and you hit that, then everything else falls afterwards. If you destroy the base and replace it with a new base, that being socialism, then there's potential for an entirely new superstructure to be built, one without that same bigotry and hate, something new and more positive. It's all about that base. That's right, Romero. It's all about that base. Bah, bah, bah. Who remembers dubstep? Oh, whenever I went to college, dubstep was all the rage. I graduated high school in 2010 and went to university in 2010, and dubstep was everywhere. And it was all about that weirdo bass. But yeah, you know, and if we can, because I've long learned that if we target these reactionary working class people, if we look at them and we say, you're a bigot, you're a racist, you're worthless, fuck you, you're just a Nazi, blah, 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 then we're never going to, base is based, then we're never going to actually solve the issue. We're just going to alienate working class people from us, right? And I think there are a lot of people who are starting to recognize this. And I think there's a lot of people who already knew this, but I think it's something that I started to recognize, certainly. And that the way that we win these people over and is not by attacking them, but by appealing to their sensibilities, saying, hey, you know, I know fucking, doesn't it suck that you work every damn day, and without y'all, this place wouldn't run, and this place wouldn't make any money, but your boss makes all the fucking money and you don't make shit. That's how you talk to these people, you know? Yeah, that's how you come up to, you don't say, do you know that your surplus labor value is being exploited by your bourgeois boss? They're going to look at you like you're fucking crazy. Or if you go up to them and say, you can't be racist because it's a systemic blah, blah, blah. No, you show them why racism is bad. Through, how do you even do that? I don't know. I'm not the one, but you do call out people on their racism. But the problem is that you cannot condemn people forever, right? People are flawed and people are human. I'm finding this very hard to express, but um, I believe that no one is beyond redemption, right? And I think that maybe a lot of people don't like that, especially I don't like saying in the world of cancel culture. I don't even like using the term cancel culture. I think it's silly. Well, yeah, of course it's bad. It divides the working class. Yeah, for sure. Racism is also bad because of its violent repercussions and its social repercussions on these people. And we have to recognize, it's all about that base. It's all about that base. But what I'm trying to express is that a lot of these people that are feeling this hate towards a certain race or towards a certain gender or a certain sexual orientation or whatever it may be, they're really just feeling anger at their own alienation in a capitalist society, right? They're really feeling their own anger towards this alienation, but know how to they don't know how to express their anger. They don't know the source of this frustration, but they think they know the source. So they think the problem in my life is immigrants. I would have better pay. I would be able to my life would be easier. There would be less traffic, the taxes would be lower if only the immigrants weren't around. And this is, false consciousness. This is what Engels talked about, false consciousness. Everyone is born conscious. We're all born conscious beings. When you become class conscious, that's whenever you recognize your class position in society. Whenever you're conscious, you're just, conscious of yourself and around you, but you're not quite class conscious yet. But also, you don't have something called a false consciousness. False consciousness is basically the wrong worldview being implanted into your head, like a conspiracy theory instead of class struggle, right? Understanding the world through racist lens or through an empirical lens or some other pseudo worldview. And it's ugh. It's this false consciousness is instilled, right? It's instilled, and it's instilled by something that Antonio Gramsci called he called it cultural hegemony, right? So cultural hegemony is the hegemony of the culture or the ruling class instilling a culture through its power and hegemony. Like in America, our cultural ruling hegemony, is a mostly Christian, hyper-capitalist, hyper-sexualized, pro-imperialist, pro-war, neoliberal society. And that's sort of what our cultural hegemony is, and it permeates through everything, through churches, through music, through the synagogue, through TV, social media, whatever it may be. The cultural hegemony is the hegemony of the ruling class, and their status and power and wealth gives them the ability to dominate culture. And this culture and this hegemony instills this false consciousness into people. And so it makes it even more difficult to make people class conscious after they have had false consciousness instilled in them. If they were just conscious, if we got them just at birth, then it would be much easier to teach them to be class conscious. But because they've been taught an entirely different worldview through the cultural hegemony of the ruling class, that has instilled this false consciousness, it's even more difficult to reach them. And that's why I feel, a part of me feels for, a part of me feels for the conservative that hates me, the conservative working class person that hates me. I feel for them. And I don't think if they just saw me, they would hate me. I think if they heard my description, a trans, queer, Jew, communist, they would immediately be turned off. But if they just met me and talked to me, that we could actually probably be fast friends, because I have a lot in common with my fellow rural Texans. You know what I mean? I was on Twitch in liberal streams, and they all talk about it. All they talk about is cultural stuff. And yeah, I mean, cultural stuff is important. Don't get me wrong, but liberals see things, social liberals, I should say, see things through a cultural lens. They don't see things through a class lens like us. It's like a lot of liberals and a lot of radical liberals and social democrats and those who don't see the world through class but are like considered quote unquote left. I feel like they're so close and yet so far away. It's like you're just a hop and a skip away from being able to understand the world in a much more enlightening way. We should homeschool our children to be communists, as Nikita Khrushchev said, and your children will be communists. I mean, I think that we should teach our kids certainly to be class conscious and to be communists. Absolutely. I think that as time goes on, we'll see. Yeah, it's culture detached from class. Exactly. As we were talking about earlier, the base defines the superstructure. The superstructure, in turn, defines the base. They cannot exist without one. One cannot exist without the other. That is the dialectic, right? So when we talk about one without the other, then we're missing it. If we talk about class without the superstructure, then we're fucked. We're just class reductionists and we're going to be stuck in the mud forever. If we talk about culture without class, then we're just going to be a bunch of libs who don't know what the fuck we're talking about or how things arise. So we have to really understand this dialectic that exists. And that's how we have to think as communists, and as Marxists. And it's really hard for a lot of us to break out of, because in the Anglo-speaking world, we're all taught this empirical way of thinking over time, and it really, really, really fucks with us. Like you hear it all the time, like, give me a definition of something. Where's your empirical data? Like that's the kind of arguments you get from a lot of people that are apolitical, like atheist, like new atheists, for example. That's a lot of the argument. And it's such a narrow way to see the world. I mean, we're dialecticians. Whenever you figure out what dialectics are, whenever that switch goes off in your head and you understand that you can see the world through this lens of dialectics, then everything fucking changes. And we should take advantage of that, certainly. Reductionism, right? We can't reduce it. You can't reduce it to one or the other. It's all encompassing. That's the thing about dialectical materialism. We have to look at all of materialism, and we have to do it in a dialectic way. These things have opposing forces. That nothing exists in a vacuum. Nothing exists alone. There's always an opposing force. Whether that contradiction is antagonistic or not, now that's a whole different question, but there's always an opposing force. Dialectics is based. Dialectics is amazing. Invented by the Jews, honed by Hegel, perfected by Marx and Engels. Taken into practice by Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Ho Chi Minh, and every Marxist ever since. Dialectics are beautiful, aren't they? It's really like, I remember the first time it happened for me. So my journey to learning dialectics, goes sort of along with my journey of becoming a communist, of being a communist. I got into the movement at 17, and the people that I met up with were Maoists, and that's, my early years, I was Maoists and stuff. But then I started really getting into the philosophy of it and the dialectics of it, the basis for the entire, revolutionary ideology. And what I found was when I tried to read Capital for the first time, I tried to jump in without even having read that much Marx yet. And I really didn't get a lot out of it the first time I read it. I read it by myself. I didn't get a lot out of it. And then I read a book called Historical and Dialectical Materialism by J.V. Stalin. And I'm sure all of y'all have heard of that. And then when I read that book, it was like a switch went off in my head. It was like a light bulb. Oh, this is dialectics. I get it. Oh, holy shit. Thank you, Stalin. And so what I did then was I researched, how do you actually, make sense of what Marx is talking about in Capital? And I saw someone suggest a better book for learning dialectics is Anti-Düring. Exactly. I call him the synthesizer. He synthesized Marxism, Leninism. He's able to synthesize ideas into clear and concise modes and set them into praxis. He's amazing. Well, yeah. Mao Zedong thought's real. Maoism isn't really that real. But and so I read a book called Anti-Düring. And basically, Anti-Düring's is Engels replying to this guy named Düring, who says that, dialectics is a nice philosophy, but it can't be used in things like natural science. You just can't do that. And so Engels said, oh, yeah? And he wrote a whole book talking shit to Düring by using dialectics and natural science, and it's fucking beautiful. And it's a scathing book. Like, he just talks so much shit. Engels is so much fun to read, so much more fun than Marx. And then I read Marx's philosophical and economic manuscripts. And that's where I learned the language of Karl Marx. Karl Marx has a very specific way of talking about things that when you read Capital, doesn't make sense unless you read it backwards, which isn't very much help. But his language he explains his language and Capital backwards, and it's fucking annoying. And so reading the economic and philosophical manuscripts, you really get what language Marx is using. And so when you go and read Capital, it just makes sense because you have the translation basically. What the fuck are you talking about, Karl Marx translation? You figured it out. And then actually Capital isn't that hard to read, it's just long. And once you do that, Capital is a book that just shows the dialectic in action over and over and over again. And that's really what it is. It's a slog, but I think it's worth it. It's a very rewarding read. And those three books prepared me for Capital. And those are the three books I recommend to everyone to read before they get into Capital. First, to learn the language of Marx, read his philosophical and economic manuscripts. They're not long at all, especially the economic ones. Read Anti-Düring. It'll show you the dialectic being used outside of the context of politics. And read Historical and Dialectical Materialism. It's the most concise and clear explanation you will get. And those three books really, I think, are great preppers for Capital. And also I suggest try reading it with a a friend, capital with a friend. It's good to knock off someone else. Yes. I really like socialism, utopian, and scientific. And On Authority is a great On Authority is basically what Ingalls did. He wrote a a I guess I don't know what you speech. It's kind of a speech because it was at the first international that he stood up and read this, and he's like, have these gentlemen never seen a revolution? A revolution is the most authoritarian act one class can take upon another. I love it. I love it. But that's true, class struggle is it's the authority of one class dominating another, right? From the beginning of history. It's just I mean, I don't I never understood the aversion to authority from anarchists. I just don't get it. I think that the problem with anarchists is that what they view as authority and what authority actually is in material reality are two different things. And I think that the sooner that they come to that realization that they're actually not that far off from being comrades. And I'm not talking about radical liberals posing as anarchists. I'm talking about those anarchists who are out in the streets, fighting for the people. Authority is a reality. And I believe there'll always be some form of authority. Authority in the home. There has to be some sort of authority on science, an authority on management, an authority on logistics, an authority on religion. There's always going to be authority, even under communism, right? The whole entire idea of authoritarianism is just made up bullshit. It's just a Western narrative to talk shit about countries that they don't like. You're talking about, like, for example, socialist Jamahiriya, which is like the most direct democratic country that ever existed in Libya, overthrown for Gaddafi being an authoritarian, a man who had held no political power since the 70s and was just a national figurehead, was an authoritarian. Authoritarian means nothing. Yeah. I mean, I have teaching. I have a teaching. I taught in China. That's what I do by trade. I still do some part-time remote teaching, but yeah, I used to teach in the classroom as well. And there has to be an authority figure, especially in a group. There has to be some direction. You can't just leave it up to the decisions of everyone. Though democracy experiments in the classroom are always fun. It's fun seeing the kids go at each other. One thing I miss about teaching in China is that I could always incorporate socialism and Marxism into my teaching because I was an oral English teacher. So basically, my purpose was to get them speaking English. Well, one way to get them to speak English, the older kids especially, was, why not recite famous quotes by Mao Zedong in English? What did Mao say in English? And we'd go over shit like that and talk about, like, do shows from Che and stuff like, if you tremble with indignation at every injustice, then you are a comrade of mine. Like, it's a great oral English thing to practice for them. And I would leave like an English quote of the day on the wall, and it would be some sort of socialist quote. Like women hold up the other half of the sky and stuff like that. Would I ever move back to China? I don't think so. Uh, I would love to. It would be the easiest thing in the world for me to do. I could go and get a job and live there for the rest of my life and make really good money and be comfortable. But the problem is that I feel like I have an obligation here in my home country. I want to extend the privilege that I experienced in China. I want to extend that to my home country, to the United States. I want Americans to feel the same privilege that I felt here at home. I have a duty to my home country to bring socialism here and to bring a better life to the community that I come from. I have an obligation to the United States, to my homeland. And I don't feel like I can leave until I have somehow fulfilled a part of that obligation that I have and that I feel. I would love to, though. I mean, um, but I have a duty. I have a duty. I mean, I could get a job. I get job offers every day from China. And it's tempting. It really is. It's tempting. But you know what we're doing here with the CPUSA? Well, they're very interested in it. Americans in America, Chinese people are very interested in Americans in America. They want to know. They want to know about it. They're curious, right? They want to know what's this like, what's that like, and they also want to sort of almost show off what's going on in their own country. They're proud of China, and they say, "Well, what do Americans think of China?" They want to know what do Americans think of China? Much like the question you're asking there. When it comes to our leadership, they don't like our leadership at all. They think that our leaders are idiots and fools. But when it comes to just regular American people, like all of them want to go visit and see it. They all want to come visit. They all want to, learn about America, to talk about the food, the movies, the culture. It's they're interested, but don't get me wrong. They'll very much openly talk shit about Biden and Trump and those people and stuff. They don't like them because they all talk shit about China. So they're very proud of China, but they also recognize there's a difference between the leadership of a country and the people of the country. They're not too hung up on what our leaders say. And they're actually pretty polite. Once they find out that you also hate the American government, you can have a good fun talking shit about it with them. They'll be polite until they find out, oh, you hate your president too? All right, well, let's talk shit, So but the Chinese people are some of the most warm, welcoming, kind people I've ever met. They've treated me like they welcomed me with open arms. They treated me with so much respect and dignity, and they allowed me into their communities and to be a part of their community and to live amongst them. They allowed that, and it was beautiful. And I thank them forever for welcoming me in for as long as they did. Yeah, the Chinese are great people. They really are. It's a beautiful culture, beautiful people, and if any of you ever get the opportunity to visit, take it. It's whatever part of the country too, because all parts of the country are so different and amazing, and whatever section you get a chance to go to, you'll enjoy. I promise you. And the whole country is amazing. I've been all over it, but There was a very large one, but this is something that the party has been. It's been the uneven development has been a part of the Chinese uh, culture for a long time, but now development is a lot more even. But there's not like a much of a cultural divide, if that's what you mean. Because I would say that, I mean, yeah, you have like country people and they act country, but I don't think that there's much of like a hate for one of the. I don't feel a divide. But then again, I only lived there for 5 years and I spent most of my time in the city, though my ex's family, who we visited, lived in the countryside. And it just seemed like another part of China, just a different part of China. It's really hard to explain. All right. Well, this has been a really good stream. I appreciate everyone who tuned in. This was really fun. Um, I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening, and I will see you coming on Friday. I'm going to have an Austrian communist come on, and we're going to talk about the Austrian Communist Party, or the Communist Party of Austria, and their recent electoral success in Graz. So that should be very cool. I hope everyone tunes in for that. And thank you all for watching. Solidarity and shalom. Good night.